can cells think? Here we go. 8 minutes. It's Michael Levin too. Oh. And guys, before we get too far into this, if you're not on our Discord, make sure you go to our Discord. It's just Universal Theory. You can find it through our link tree, or you can find it through our bio. I think you have to go to the link tree on our TikTok bio and then go to the Discord. But on our Discord, we have a TikTok topics page, and I want you guys to share videos there. If there's a video that you've watched that you want to watch with the community, let's watch it. Just put a recommendation in there. Otherwise, it's just going to be videos that I find fascinating. Do androids dream of electric sheep? That's a question for ChatGPT. That's not a question for me. Thuni, thanks for the follow. Maybe I did manifest you into my reality, but we on the same wave. Yes. Hey, this community, you're on the wave with this community then. That's where we're at. This whole community is full of like-minded people. All right, let's go.
People tend to think of intelligence as being of two kinds. There is the quote-unquote real intelligence, which is what we are supposed to have. And then there's this idea of a collective intelligence. So swarms of bees, colonies of ants, shoals of fish, and so on. And people tend to think of those as radically different things. But the reality is all intelligence is collective intelligence. And this is because we are all made of parts. So you and I are collections of cells, and these cells, including neurons and various other cells in our body, have many competencies. This is because they were once separate individuals by themselves. They were unicellular organisms with all of the skills needed to survive in a complex world.
So what's interesting about Michael Levin, if you're not familiar with him, I highly recommend you get familiar with him, or you watch our lives or read their book when it comes out, because we reference a lot of his stuff. He's doing cutting edge stuff at I think Tufts University for biology. Like I said, he's talking about manipulating the bioelectric field. And he has this idea of a light cone, where the light cone of the cell, so cancer cells are more selfish. Their light cone is much smaller. And and he's working on ways to essentially make cells less selfish, right? And that would slow the growth. So instead of just hitting it with chemo and trying to kill it, it's changing its light cone. It's literally changing the cell's perception of what it is. It's a very powerful thing that he's working on.
That journey that we all took, those progressive steps by which we construct ourselves, we construct our bodies, we construct our minds, that journey is maybe the most profound question in all of science. I'm Michael Levin, and I'm a developmental biologist at Tufts University. Developmental biology is maybe the most magical of all sciences because you get to see with your own eyes that journey that we all take from physics to mind. We all start out life as an unfertilized oocyte, and then slowly, gradually, step by step, that oocyte turns into a bunch of cells that self-construct an embryo, and eventually that embryo matures and becomes a large-scale adult. In the case of a human, it will be an individual with metacognitive capacities and the ability to reason, but we all have our origin in that chemistry and physics of that initial oocyte. And
not only that, we go through all those, years of evolution. We go through all that evolution in the womb, which is a powerful thing. It shows that the gate of initiation for a human is through all that evolution. So that kind of helps us understand what a soul is.
Magic of developmental biology is that there is a mechanism by which all of these cells get together and they are able to cooperate towards large-scale goals. This is the notion that biology uses what I call a multi-scale competency architecture, which basically means that we are not simply nested structurally in terms of cells, which comprise tissues, comprising organs, the bodies, and then ultimately societies and so on. That's obviously true on a structural level. But more interesting is the fact that each of these layers has certain problem-solving competencies. Each one solves problems in their own space. So cells are simultaneously solving problems in physiological spaces and metabolic spaces and gene expression spaces, and tissues and organs are solving those problems. But for example, during embryogenesis or regeneration, they're also solving problems in anatomical space. They're trying to navigate a path from the shape of an early embryo or a fertilized zygote all the way up to the complexity of a human body with all of the different types of organs and structures. So the competency architecture refers to the fact that all of the parts inside of us and inside of all other creatures are themselves competent agents with.
So, and what he's getting into, right, the collective consciousness is, this idea of emergent data structures. So you have these emerging data structures as complexity changes. So as you have more and more complex, more and more cells, right, complex cells, you begin to have organelles and organs, and then you begin to have organ systems, and you begin to have a body. It's these emergent, these data structures emerge from this complexity. But to say that the things that came together and became a network have zero intelligibility in their own right is kind of preposterous, right? To say that there's no intelligibility associated with it and it's just random. It randomly happens for every human exactly the same. There's obviously some sort of intelligibility. There's some sort of rules or laws that it's following.
Preferences, with goals, with various abilities to pursue those goals, and other types of problem-solving capacities. What evolution has given us is this remarkable architecture where every level shapes the behavioral landscape of the levels below, and the levels below do clever and interesting things that allow the levels above not to have to micromanage and to be able to control in an interesting top-down capacity. One of the most important things about this emerging field of diverse intelligence is that we as humans have very limited capacity and finely honed ability to see intelligence in medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds through three-dimensional space. So we see other primates, and we see crows, and we see dolphins, and we have some ability to recognize intelligence. But we really are very bad at recognizing intelligence in unconventional embodiments, where our basic expectations strain against this idea that there could be intelligence in something extremely small or extremely large. People often criticize this approach by saying, well, then anything goes. If you can pick up a rock and say, I think this rock is cognitive and intelligent, there's a spirit with hopes and dreams inside of every rock. That's not what this is. This is quite different. As an engineer, what you have to do is you have to come up with a way to look at a particular system that doesn't overestimate its intelligence or underestimate its intelligence. If you treat complex animals as if they were clockwork, you're going to miss everything that's important and exciting about how they work. If you treat a clock as if it had a complex intelligence, you're going to waste a lot of time. But getting it right is fundamentally important. And so you have this spectrum where the engineer has to pick the right level for the right system. And it's critical not to then say, well, that doesn't sound like human intelligence. Right, we're looking for the basic minimal version. So I think it should have two things. The first thing it should have is some degree of goal-directedness, some ability to take different paths to get to the same goal. So this is William James's definition of intelligence.
But like the video we watched yesterday, if different paths mean that there's some sort of intelligibility associated with it, what about light? Because light takes all paths. And if you missed the video from 2 days ago, there's a little bit of an issue with the audio, but I'm going to try to get the full clips up on YouTube. So Universal Theories YouTube, I don't think they're too long to try to put up on TikTok. But it talks about how light mathematically, and they show it experimentally, takes all paths. So is there intelligibility with light? And then what happens is all of the paths deconstruct or construct with each other into the optimal path. What's that about? Obviously, there's some sort of intelligibility there, right? Because the principle of least action, the law of principle of least action is in effect.
It has to have some ability to undertake actions that are not completely determined by local circumstances. So you start with all of that in systems that have scaled up those basic, very fundamental, non-zero levels of agency. We call that life. So it is a spectrum, and I think that in this universe, it goes all the way to the bottom.
So yes, slime molds solving mazes. We talk about that in our book as well. We talk about slime molds solving mazes and how Japan used slime mold. They put, and this is how they did it, at each major city, they put food, a resource for the slime. And what they did was they let the mold grow and grab the food, and then the mold will optimize how it sends the nutrients to the rest of the body. And then from there, they looked at the mold and what it looked like, and then they started creating their subway system based off of that. So yes, mold does optimize. Exactly right. It solves mazes, it optimizes. There's one other thing on here that was about, there's one other thing. how are you taking this shift to the much peaceful world? I think that's saying, like, how are we taking this shift to make the world more peaceful? Well, obviously, spreading the information helps individuals understand. There's a lot of people with questions, but it's very foggy and very hazy for them, and they are susceptible. And I get that, and I'm susceptible to information as well. But that's why it's important to have communication in a community where we're not just saying yes, yes. We're having conversations that help us logically get from point A to point B. That's how you end up helping, because then that person can take that information with them. Okay, just looking through some of these comments. Yep. Oh yeah, y'all like the mold thing. Y'all aren't hip to the mold thing, huh? Yep. All right, here we go.
It's very hard for people to think about these unconventional kinds of intelligences that may be either too large or too small. And of course, they often work in other spaces. So we're good with three-dimensional space, but imagine if we had a primary sense of our own blood chemistry. If you could feel your blood chemistry the way that you currently see and smell and taste things that are around you, I think we would have absolutely no problem having an intuitive understanding of physiological state space, the way we do for three-dimensional space. I think that we would immediately be able to recognize our various internal organs as intelligent agents navigating that space and solving these kind of problems, all the various things that happen during the day. And here's one of my favorite examples of problem solving in physiological and transcriptional spaces. So we have these worms, these are Planaria, these are flatworms. And if you put these flatworms in a solution of
So pay attention right here. This is very important because this kind of shows adaptability, intelligible adaptability over evolution, as far as over random evolution.
barium. Barium is a non-specific potassium channel blocker. It blocks the ability of these cells to exchange potassium with the outside world. The cells really don't like it, especially cells in the head, because the head is full of neurons. Neurons love to pass potassium. And so what happens is that overnight their heads explode. Literally, it's called head deprogression. They literally lose their heads. But if you leave them in the barium, within a couple of weeks, they grow back a new head. And the new head is completely barium adapted, has no problem with the barium whatsoever. We said, how could this be? We looked at the original heads, the original naive heads. We looked at the barium adapted heads, and we simply did a subtraction and asked, what are the different genes that are expressed here? And we found out that the barium adapted heads have just a small number of genes that were turned on and off to allow them to adapt to this novel
epigenetics.
Stressor. Now here's the amazing part. Planaria never see barium in the wild. There's no evolutionary history of knowing what to do when you're hit with barium. This is not an ecological stressor that they normally have to deal with. So imagine you're a bunch of cells and you're...
So the reason why that's important is it's not like they're unlocking some innate ability that they learned in nature. That's what he's trying to prove. It's not like, oh, well, that information was already there, but it was inert. It didn't need it because it's not around barium. And then once it was, once it was around barium chloride, now it turned on those genes. No, that's not what happened. It's showing that it's adapting intelligibility, right? It's adapting in an intelligent way.
Hit with this incredible physiological stressor you've never seen before. You've got tens of thousands of genes. What do you do? How do you know which genes to turn on and off? You don't have time to try combinations. You don't have time for an exhaustive search. You don't have time for hill climbing. You don't have time to try random things because you'll probably kill the cell long before you solve the problem. And yet you were able to navigate from where you are to where you need to be to escape this physiological stressor. And so what I think evolution has done is pivoted some of the same tricks from very simple systems that only solve metabolic problems, eventually to physiological, and then to transcriptional problems. And when multicellularity comes on the scene, large-scale anatomical problems. And so it's never a question of, is something physics and chemistry or is it cognitive? The question is, what kind of cognition and how much?
Yeah, that was just a short one. So let's see. Yeah. So we all have divine intelligence. I would say it depends on what you mean by divine. I mean, I wouldn't even make it mystical in that sense and say it's divine intelligence. I would just say it's intelligibility that we're all working back towards. It's an optimization of the system. The mechanism is working towards, it's adapting towards optimization. It's adapting towards refinement. It's adapting, it's adapting towards a different expression, right? If you look at a gradient, the more refined and the more complex you get different emergent data structures. That's what he was just showing with the collective consciousness, and we think it's a singular consciousness because of the top-down ability to control. But all that's happening is complexity, 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 emergent data structure, emergent data structure. It's a new way to facilitate intelligence. So, because all things in infinity have to happen, right? All things are going to happen. Entropy. Entropy is essentially the engine in which complex organisms emerge. Yeah. Oh, Sarah. So we are watching. We made it through a DNA video. We made it through a DMT video, and I just wanted to introduce everybody to Michael Levin. He didn't talk much about the bioelectric field here, but he talked about the planaria and how they adapt, and how essentially adaptability. When an organism is stressed, it can adapt in a manner that through traditional evolutionary means would take thousands of years, but they can do it essentially overnight. Me and Jordan have had conversations back and forth and arguments essentially about like, he's like, oh yeah, you know, if gravity was to like just dissipate, or it couldn't happen, but like if something happened to where humans were going to be extinct in the next couple of days, he thinks certain humans would just be able to adapt like this. My mind is it takes a little longer. Like the stressor has to be around a little bit longer. It's not just going to be, and it depends on what the adaptability is. Oh, one of them was all men were just gone, right? All men were gone. It was just women. Could some of these women start to reproduce by themselves? Could they essentially clone themselves, right? Or would they be able to mutate their own genetic material in a way that allowed for survivability, right? So that's over the course of, you know, a lifespan, 60 years. Could somebody, you know, essentially have that mutation that was already on the planet? You know, conversations like that where we go back and forth for quite some time. Oh, I used to have one of those. One of what? A Planaria? Oh, that's really cool. Organisms are engines of entropy. Exactly right. And think about entropy. One thing people don't realize about entropy, so we get small packets of low entropy from the sun, and we go in on principles and protocols about entropy and time and potentia and all of that, and how in a state of absolution or in a state of potentia, it sees entropy different than it does here. But I'm not going to get into all the details, but we go into all of that. And we go into informational entropy. But the entropy on Earth the energy on Earth, like we get photons from the sun. So if you were to say, is there more energy on Earth now than there was in 1940 or 1920s, 100 years ago? In 100 years, surely with the sun beating down on us, there's more energy on Earth. Nope, there is not more energy on Earth. The sun is giving us low entropy energy.
We'll see what you think of this.
The sun is giving us low entropy energy. We're then taking that energy with low entropy, using that energy and turning it into a more entropic state, and then radiating it back out. So the energy on the planet Earth has not changed. Not from the sun. All right, and look at all these complex, look how much more, you could take it even further and say back to hominids, and now you have advanced life forms. But the amount of energy hasn't changed. We've just, our organisms are entropy machines. They love the low entropy, and they'll use that energy that's in a low entropic state and then spit out high entropy and radiate it back out into space. Divine deep intelligence is deep knowing beyond the thinking mind. Sure, yeah, sure, exactly. There's always something just beyond the horizon. There's always something just beyond the horizon. But I don't think we need to make it mystical. I mean, it's fine if you do and call it divine. You know, it just depends on, because to some people that means something else, right? We are all divine, formless energy, consciousness. Then we become the form, body, human. We tapped in. I don't think that it's formless, because if it's energy, it has a form because it has a body. It's at the very minimum, at least fluctuations. Right? It doesn't go from no form to form. But I see what you're saying. It's a higher perspective, anyways. Great live. Sure. Thank you. Is the Earth kind of like a capacitor then? Well, a capacitor is something that right? At first, when you cut on something, when you cut on the energy, you close the circuit for a capacitor, it acts as a brake, right? It acts as a brake in the circuit just for a little bit because it needs to fill up, right? You need to fill that potential. But then once you cut off the power, you will still have power for a little while that capacitor drains. So, I mean, you could look at it like that if you looked at, if you're looking at entropy, but entropy was always going out, you could kind of look at it like that because there is going to be time. Like if the sun was to shut off, you still have all the photons that have to make it to Earth with the low entropic energy. Then we would use it. Then we would spit it out. So I mean, you could kind of look at it like a capacitor. Could there be experience without belief? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Experience. Belief, right? Your experience, it's like, are you talking about perceptual experience? Belief, are you talking about a thought, like a belief in something else? We'd have to get into definitions before that could be answered. All right, you guys, I think I'm done. That was 3 videos. I hope you guys enjoyed the live. Like I said, go to our Discord and recommend videos. If not, we've got this insect protein. Looks like they're talking about, is insect protein going to be a way that we feed people in the future? I don't know. Quantum immortality. What is antimatter? Resolving the wave-particle duality. Consciousness in the mind with Michael Levin. More Michael Levin. Some Stephen Wolfram and his theory of everything. Stephen Wolfram's a brilliant guy. Why does the universe exist at all? The Ancient Crisis You Never Heard Of. That's with John Vervecki. So we've got some good stuff coming up. So just make sure there's some more DMT stuff in there. We'll check out some more DMT stuff. So yeah, we've got some good stuff coming up. If you don't follow the channel, make sure you follow the channel. And yeah, I will be live again probably sometime tomorrow.